Hello, Bre. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Very good. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for being flexible on the timing and stuff. I appreciate it's early where you are. Thanks for
Oh,
that.
no, thank you. Thank you for being flexible. I know this was short, quick notice, so I definitely appreciate that.
I just like talking about myself. It's terrible. Any opportunity to waffle is much appreciated.
We'll probably get nothing done then because I'm the same personality type. So I always kind of like to start with a little background on the author that I'm interviewing, just because although I've read about you, any audience that might be looking at this might not know about you and what you write. So if you wouldn't mind just giving us a breakdown on who you are, what you write, how you got started in the author world.
Okay, my name is Mark Stay. I'm a novelist and a screenwriter. I'm also co-presenter of the bestseller Experiment podcast for writers as well. I got into writing. I've been writing since I was a kid. Foolishly, I thought I'd try and be an actor, first of all. When it became apparent my career wasn't having the same trajectory as Harrison Ford, I started writing. Wife and I started a theatre company, and I started doing plays, which is a brilliant way to start because you get that instant audience reaction, as to whether or not something is working. But then I did discover I'm not a playwright. Most of the stuff I was writing were essentially shortish films on a stage. And I adapted one of them into a screenplay. Another one of them I tried to turn into a book. Neither worked, but they got me agents and got me options, and I met producers and directors. And while all this was going on as well, I was working in publishing because my wife we both got into drama school. My wife got the grant. That's how old I am. The government used to pay for our education here. And she went to drama school, and I had a job at Waterstones, which is a big book chain in the UK, which I loved. I loved working there. I loved meeting authors and stuff like that. So I stayed on it, then sold myself for a company car and became a sales rep for a publisher, eventually hopping to a publisher called the Orion Publishing Group, where I became their Amazon manager. So I was looking after Amazon for about 10 years until about 3 years ago when I left and became a full-time writer. A couple of things helped that happen. One was a couple of movies. So I had a film called Robot Overlords released about 5-6 years ago. I've got a second movie coming up. Hopefully, I don't know if I can say this yet. Probably next February. It's not been confirmed. A horror movie called Unwelcome. And I've written, where are we, 5 books so far. So I did the novelization to Robot Overlords for Gollancz, which was huge fun. That was my first published book. And then I did Back to Reality with my co-presenter of the bestseller Experiment. That whole podcast came out of us wanting to write and self-publish a book in 12 months to see if we can hit some of those Kindle charts. And we asked our listeners to beat us to it, and many of them did. And then I had a standalone fantasy novel called The End of Magic. And most recently, I've got a series called The Witches of Woodville, which is set in a small village in Kent in England during the Second World War. And the way I pitch it, it's basically like the last 10 minutes of Bedknobs and Broomsticks. It's witches and Nazis and strange things in the woods. So yeah, that's where I am at the moment.
So, bit of diverse experience. So, you have screenwriting, playwriting, you also have trad pub, indie pub, and a handful of genres within. So, you've seen a little bit of everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I think hybrid is the future. I think one of the things we didn't want to do with the podcast was say be indie or be trad or whatever. I think it was becoming very clear that for indie authors, there was all kinds of amazing opportunities out there. And for authors who've been traditionally published, they can pick up the amazing skill sets that indie authors have developed and and I've seen this a lot in lockdown actually, because I've seen traditionally published authors who are used to their publishers doing everything for them going, how do I do a book launch online? And of course, indie authors are going, well, we've been doing this for years. They've been learning from each other. And it's been fun doing it. So I think I loathe marketing. I hate marketing. And I don't think I'm very good at it for your readers' information. But it is something you have to get your head around. And as part of the podcast, just been experimenting with it a lot just to see what works, what doesn't. And YouTube has been part of that. So there's a segue.
If you hadn't said it, that was exactly how I was going to segue when I heard you say experiment.
Nice.
So YouTube is part of your marketing experimentation. Was that kind of the thought process from the beginning? Let's just try something new and see if it sticks.
I was chatting to a friend of mine, a guy called Jeremy Mason, who has a YouTube channel about digital marketing and online marketing. I have a YouTube channel that's been sitting around not doing very much for a very long time. And about 10 months ago, I said, I've got a book coming out. I want to do a trailer for the book. I was getting a bit fed up with blogging, just word blogging. And I'm a bit of a show off. I enjoy, I have no problem being in front of a camera or speaking live or anything like that. So I said, I'm gonna start dabbling with video. And Jeremy and I did there's a playlist on my YouTube page where we started looking at the basics of YouTube videos and marketing. And specifically for authors and the kind of things that work, the kind of things that don't. We've had guests on there talking about the blogs and blog tours and marketing and what have you. And all the while, I was putting my videos out there, seeing what worked, seeing what didn't. So if you look at my YouTube channels, especially early on, there's a lot of experimentation, different kind of looks, different lengths, different vibes. And what I enjoyed doing as well, because I don't want to do the hard sell. I don't want to be, I'm nearly 50 years old. So if I try and be that young preppy YouTuber, you'll see through that. So right. What you see now is pretty much what I'm like I'm a little more subdued now. I try and be me, basically, and hope that if people like me, they might be prompted to check out my books. But the thing with the YouTube channel now is it's writing advice. It's not really pushing my books. Every now and then I'll do a video specifically about one of the books, but most of it is saying, okay, I'm on just this week, I'm on the second draft of a book. Here's what I'm doing with the editing process. And I'll take people through that and keep it honest and hopefully couched in a way so that they can take something away from it and apply it to their own work. That said, the most popular video on the channel is where I talk about Terry, who's a big influence on me, and according where to start with Terry Pratchett and the debt that I owe him. So it's helpful to people who are thinking, okay, I want to read Terry Pratchett, where do I start? And I talk about where I started and possible ways to, because there's all kinds of different series that you can start with. And then I say at the end, I owe him a huge debt of his books. I met him a few times. I sold some of his books, that sort of thing. And that is by far and away the biggest hit on my channel, because it's appealing to a large fan base and it's being helpful. And there's my friend Jeremy put back to me saying, do more of that, do more of that, and I was like, yes, I could, but then I just end up being the Terry Pratchett channel, as much as I love to. Yeah, and it didn't really appeal. But the writing advice is something we have for the bestseller experiment. We have a bestseller academy. So I'm constantly interacting with aspiring authors on there and helping them with their stuff. So it's just something that comes naturally. So it's one of these things where I try and do one a week. I try and keep it regular. Ideally, according to Jeremy and other experts, you should do 2 a week, because YouTube loves that regularity of content. And I think the key to YouTube is understanding what YouTube does. They like to provide regular, useful, helpful, entertaining content. So if you can get your head around that, I think it will help get you subscribers and help get you views.
I think honestly, you've just said the key to most social media, right? Like, I think that's just the easiest summary for so many things that we try to do. And I appreciate that you're a Pratchett fan, because I love Neil Gaiman about the same level, maybe not quite as much, but he's definitely one of my fangirl. That's one of the people I could talk about for hours.
Yeah, I used to sell Neil's books when I was at Headline, and I sold American Gods. And it got to, I just love that book. And it got to the point where my booksellers would go, look, we'll take some, just leave, just shut up talking about it and get out. To the point where Neil called me the fanboy among the sales team. So
you're welcome, Neil. Yeah, it's funny that you say that. I jumped into Clubhouse, which I don't know if you've heard of Clubhouse, just another new social media.
Yes. Yeah, I can't get my head around that. That one's just too weird. It's like going to a party where you've not actually been invited, or you've ever snuck into a wedding or any kind of social gathering and you're there in the corner. Do I join in? There's a friend of mine and she's an actor, and she's probably more gregarious than I am, and she loves it because she just jumps in and chats to everyone. And I think if you've got that kind of outgoing personality, I think you can thrive in something like that. But it's like I said, I'm nearly 50. Some of this stuff, I've just joined TikTok as well, and I'm sure I'm not doing it properly. I'm getting lots of subscribers, doing sort of daily writing tips on there, but without any of the fun bells or whistles. It's just me talking, and I'm sure that's not what TikTok wants, but that's what they're getting from me. So
yeah, one of the first Clubhouse rooms I jumped in on kind of pure happenstance was Neil Gaiman talking to a whole room full of people, and I was like, I'm in. Like, I don't know what this is, but I'm here. So but I didn't get to talk to him, unfortunately, but I would have. Okay, so let's not let me look like just some sort of fantasy Neil Gaiman fangirl, but I have real questions for you. So you mentioned doing a lot of writer tips on your YouTube, which in my research, I think that's pretty common, actually. A lot of authors use that as their primary content, it seems. But are you noticing a translation into sales from that content?
no, frankly.
Okay.
I think it's so difficult to make the connection. I can tell because I offer editorial services, and I can definitely tell you I've got clients from YouTube because they've seen this and liked me and figured that they can work with me. So I've definitely got that. Sales, a few, but nothing substantial yet. It's the thing. I'm 10 months into it, and I think what a lot of people have to realize with anything that's particularly something as well established as YouTube, because it's been around for a very long time, is that you're not going to be an overnight success. This takes a lot of perseverance, a lot of diligence, and keeping up that regular kind of content. Certainly when I look, my wife has a gardening YouTube channel, and she started just a couple of years after YouTube started, and she's got 23,000 subscribers. That's over awesome. Nearly 600 videos. I mean, she's very big, but that's gardening, and it's giving gardening advice. And she keeps it very simple. She assumes no knowledge every time. Whereas if you watch gardening shows, certainly in the UK, they use a lot of Latin terms and everything. It can be a bit off-putting for people. She's very grounded. And I think there are fewer writers in the world. There are lots of YouTube channels out there. I think the thing that I have is I've worked in publishing. I've seen how the sausage is made, if you like. I know agents, I know publishers, I know a lot of authors. I've interviewed a lot of authors. I have that kind of experience and expertise from that side of things. And that's what I try and focus on. But people don't know that until they've watched a few of them. So that's the thing. You're waiting for two things. You're waiting for the YouTube algorithm to realize that people like what you do and start pushing you out there. And that's the thing I discovered with Jeremy, is it can be very picky. It takes a long time to figure out who's doing good stuff. And like I say, I'm 10 months into this, and I think after a year, I'm hoping it will figure out there's a cycle to the kind of stuff that I do and start pushing me out there, but we shall see. And I regularly tweet about these. Like I said, you just have to be useful and not worry. I've looked at other bloggers and the kind of things that they do, and like I say, I'm an old man. I can't be young and perky as others, but like I say, I do have that experience, which I think helps me.
Yeah, I think the thing that we have to remember about platforms is they learn. They're AI, they're artificial intelligence, and they're learning all the time about who actually will want what you're putting out there, whether it's good or not, what the audience really is. So we have to keep trying to figure that out. I think we lose sight of that sometimes. So just like KDP is a learning platform as well, a learning AI. So it figures out what your ideal audience is. So is YouTube.
Absolutely. I mean, when something is new, like TikTok, first couple of weeks on TikTok, I got so many
hot mess.
So many people liking and following and stuff like that, because it's new and it's like, hey, here we go. Here's another one. Here's another one. Yeah. And it gets very excited. YouTube is very established and moves very slowly, I think.
Yeah, TikTok is a really,
I'm sticking to it.
TikTok's a whole beast. Like, it's a very interesting algorithm, the way that one works. I haven't figured it out yet, but I definitely find it interesting. So speaking of your experience that you share on your channel, and I definitely think that's worthwhile to show all the different sides, because you're going to have a perspective that is radically different than a lot. Based on your experience, what kind of tips might you have for authors that someone else might not think of for getting started in YouTube?
I think honesty, be thyself, be true to thyself. I think people will see through, particularly in a visual medium, they'll see through any kind of front. My kids' generation, these are digital natives, and they totally see through anyone who isn't being their true self. I think keep it regular, keep the content coming regular, make it useful is another one. Be helpful, be free with your advice. Don't feel like you have to hold anything back, because we're all in this together. If you indeed trad, hybrid, whatever kind of author you are, this isn't a zero-sum game. If you help someone and they get some success, that doesn't mean you're not going to get some success. This stuff is all reciprocal. It's all what comes around. I'm a big believer what goes around comes around. Be helpful, be regular, and be yourself. I think are the those things that people will just start to see you as reliable. And be honest as well. I think when things go wrong, when things don't work, something we've discovered on the podcast is we love it when things go disastrously wrong, because then we can share that with people and they don't feel so alone. We had Joe Abercrombie on the podcast, massive selling fantasy author, international bestseller. And he was telling us very honestly about some of the problems he's had, with his most recent books and things that have gone disastrously wrong and all the self-doubt that he has. So if you're starting out and you think, wow, Joe's having that problem, and we've had people like Joanne Harris on the show as well, where these are major authors, you don't feel so alone. Also, you can think, oh gosh, that anxiety never goes away, but that's at least you're not alone in that feeling. So yeah, I think that helps a lot.
Yeah, normalizing the anxiety, is that what you're doing?
yeah it's a background radiation of anxiety that you just have to get used to, because this is the thing. If you're a writer, you're putting your heart and soul on the page, and then you get a snarky comment on Goodreads, and that can ruin your day, your week, your month, your year, whatever. I think it can be, this is a very personal profession that we're working in, and it can be hurtful when it doesn't go. And it's like you'll be having a crummy day, and then you'll see someone's got a massive book deal, they've gone to #1 or a really successful promotion. You go, why isn't that me? And but that day this too shall pass. That's another good bit of advice. It's just ride out the storm, because you'll have your good days as well.
Yeah, I always love when writers turn really snarky comments into like ad copy, like for Facebook or something. Those are my absolute favorite. Yes, and what better way to promote it? Like, it's clever. I love that.
Joe Abercrombie was telling us that for a long time he was tweeting his 1-star reviews, because his books are there's no shortage of sex and violence, and people will object to that, and he kept tweeting those. But he said it got to the point where genuine fans started leaving 1-star reviews in the hope that he would tweet them. So he had to put an end to that, because it was bringing his average way down. So yeah, be very careful about that kind of stuff.
There's an author that I'm friends with that he writes thrillers, and one of his shticks is he reads his bad reviews in his bathtub with a glass of wine. I think he puts it on his YouTube even, maybe, if I remember. Those are always funny and clever.
Yes, nudity, any kind of nudity. Because again, going back to my wife's YouTube channel, we have a thing called, I think it's an international thing, International Naked Gardening Day, which happens every year. To celebrate her 200th episode, we did a video, a bit like the Austin Powers thing, where you don't quite see anything. There are melons in the way. You get the picture. By far and away, her biggest video, massive. Ad revenue that has brought in has probably paid for vacations. Yes, yeah. I know YouTube is probably a bit more down on nudity these days, but yeah.
But you mentioned something too. I think we learn a lot from our mistakes. So have you made any mistakes with YouTube specifically that you were like, but maybe you learned from it?
Oh gosh, yes. If you look at the early ones, because I started the YouTube channel when Robot Overlords came out, and we did a bunch of videos, about 8 videos of me being interviewed. And this was before I did the podcasts and stuff like that. You learn how to put your best foot forward, how to be your best possible self. I don't think there's any room for snarkiness from you. I don't think, it's or self-deprecation. It's one thing being honest. It's another thing having a kind of self-deprecation. Of course, being British, self-deprecation is what we do. Oh no, it's rubbish. Oh, don't look at it. I remember reading a book about two screenwriters who went to Hollywood, and they did all that self-deprecation thing, and they did all these meetings in Hollywood. And at the end of one meeting, one of the Hollywood execs sidled over to him, gave him a card, and said, you need to get some therapy, some counseling for your self. Stop putting yourself down, man. You're a good writer. And they didn't realize it's just how we are. We do this all the time. So yeah, those early videos are a bit stiff and awkward. And then for my End of Magic book, I tended just to use visuals and words. And I discovered that when I started putting myself into it and figured out who my audience was, things improved, and that's happened with the more recent books as well. Yeah, I think these things come with practice, but I think work on your shtick, work on putting your best foot forward. It's something I've learned from the podcast as well, is if you listen to those early episodes, I'm the snarky, cynical one, which I can be, which is something I can be like that, but it didn't fit the tone of the show, and I think I just brought out my positive side. Now, I'm a realist. I know doing a YouTube channel isn't going to result in millions of sales overnight, but I enjoy it as well. That's the other thing. I enjoy doing it. I enjoy the filming, the editing process, and what have you. The other thing, the other big lesson is I've started scripting a lot more. I used to just waffle. I'd have bullet points, or I would have just the vaguest idea of what I was going to talk about. And you can tell if you watch those early videos, I can only edit so many of those out. So what I've started doing more recently is scripting them. And then I use an app called Teleprompter, where I put the text in there and the text appears on because I record these on my phone, and the text is scrolling by. And that means I usually get it in one take, or maybe 2 or 3 takes. Whereas previously it was taking 10 takes, and then it was taking much longer to edit the whole mess together. So scripting it nice and tightly gives you, there's a conciseness of your thinking, and it helps you focus on what you're actually trying to say rather than meandering all over the place, as I am now. So yeah, scripting and using a teleprompter app has been really helpful, really helpful.
Yeah, something I find with interviews as well. Like you can't see, but beside I have all of our questions, because sometimes I get in here with different authors and I just want to talk about things, and I find that we do. We have lovely conversations, and I get to the end, I'm like, I didn't ask enough questions.
That's the difference between something like this, which for your magazine needs to be concise, where you want to have 10 tips or whatever it is you're aiming for, or a YouTube video. And I try and keep the runtime to about 5 minutes. Tops, simply because that's as much as I'm willing to tolerate. You know, I can anything above 10 minutes and I'm starting to get a bit. But the joy of podcasts is you can chat for an hour, you know, or longer if you want. So podcasting, it's slightly different in that I will have bullet points, but I enjoy listening to authors, and I think that's the key with that long form, is to listen, let them talk, because they'll reveal stuff to you that you would never have asked about previously, and give them the room to, you know, breathe and get into what they're interested in. And if you listen, they'll say something, and rather than interrupt, I usually just jot something down. And then when they finish their point, I go, can we come back to this thing that you were talking about here? That was really interesting. And I find that authors love that, because there's a spontaneity to that as well. Anyway, getting off the point here. But yeah. With YouTube, yeah, the scripting and keeping it concise is really helpful.
Are there any technical things that have helped you with your YouTube for recording?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. I just do it on an iPhone. So if you've got a half decent smartphone, the cameras on those are amazing. Then I edit on iMovie, really simple on a Mac. If you're a PC user, I hear good things about Trelby, which is a free video editing thing. But I use iMovie on the Mac, which is perfect, absolutely perfect. I make some tweaks to the sound. It's always worth going in and just checking the sound levels and adding a little loudness to it and cutting out the background noise, which is something you can do on iMovie. Get a decent microphone if you need one. Although when I'm recording indoors, I tend not to bother. I just use the iPhone's microphone. Like I said, I use the Teleprompter app. I also use a service called Happy Scribe, which transcribes the audio from my videos. So you have a transcription, And you can also convert those into subtitles. So there's two great things going on there. The transcription, which I will put on my blog, and I'll put on just on my blog, actually. I've got two. I was going to say that blog and that blog. But anyway, for the purposes of this, I put it on my blog, which is good SEO because it has the whole transcript there. And the subtitles are great because YouTube, very big on accessibility. And of course, I've got friends who are hard of hearing, so they love that too. Subtitles, again, the algorithm will go, using subtitles. And they're timed subtitles. So they produce something called an SRT file, which you upload, and it times exactly with what you're saying. And you can go in and edit that if it's, because it uses an AI, so it'll get words wrong. It's another reason I keep my videos fairly short, because you could, if you do an hour-long video with something like, you could spend all afternoon watching it and they get words wrong, making corrections or whatever. So yeah, that's really helpful. There's a very good website called Answer the Public, which if you go there and tap in a subject, say first draft of a screenplay, it will scrape through the internet and find out the kind of questions that people are asking about first drafts of a screenplay. And then I put that in the tags. So it will be, how do I write the first draft of a screenplay? Tips for writing the first draft. Stuff that you might think, you might sit there trying to rack your brains, trying to figure out, but this does it all for you. And it's the actual questions that people are asking. So again, it's that thing of being helpful and being useful. Google will say, okay, people are asking these specific questions. Who's giving them answers? Oh, this person over here. Let's put them together. So that really helps as well. So yeah, Happy Scribe and Answer the Public have been very useful.
That sounds like really good SEO tips, honestly, like all of those things. I'm assuming you probably do that for your podcast too, transcribe everything and put it all the right places.
No, we don't, unfortunately. Because that's a resources thing, I think, because most of our episodes are an hour long.
Right.
And we already struggle to pay our editors just to edit the show. For the Academy, we're working through the backlist of episodes using Otter, which is an AI that is very good at transcribing. All this technology is getting better and better, and they're really good at identifying voices and accents and stuff like that. The day will come, I think, where it'll be a lot easier, but we've got up to episode 330 something. So to go back and transcribe all of those, we should have done it from day one and just here's a tip. Make it part of your routine from day one. Then you won't have to go back and move mountains to make it happen. Certainly some of the key episodes, the first year, we did transcripts of our interviews with the author, but not because me and Mr. D, we talk before and we talk afterwards. None of that's, well, it's been transcribed for the Academy, and it's one of these things that we offer to people who join the Academy as a search tool. But yes, early days yet. I've spoken a lot of waffle over the last 5 years.
That happened. What do you have planned for your YouTube channel in the future? What do you want to do?
I'd like to do more live stuff. I've been using StreamYard for live events. For my book launch in February, I used StreamYard. I've got the paid thing, so I did both Facebook and YouTube. That was huge fun, really good fun. And I've got a new book coming in October, so I'll be doing it for that too. But it's one of those things, I've paid for a year's subscription for StreamYard, and I hardly use it. So I need to find more uses for that. I'd like to do more of that. I'm thinking of maybe getting more authors to come on and talk to me, although that kind of clashes with the podcast. So we'll see how that works out. I don't want to just be repeating myself or overlapping too much. But yeah, it's a good question, actually, because I've been, like I say, I want to do a year, see how that goes, start looking at what's working. Because the great thing with YouTube is there are all these analytics. So you can dig in and look at the kind of people who are watching you, how long they watch for, the videos that are most popular, the age groups, where they are in the world, that sort of thing. And that's always fascinating because you'll have assumptions which will often be challenged and overturned, and then you have to rethink things. Yeah, it's once I get to a year, I think I'm going to step back and figure out what changes I need to make to improve and go from there.
I'm trying to think of, I think you answered this, but I was going to say, have you seen any emerging trends on YouTube that other people should maybe be aware of?
I think what's interesting because YouTube are doing the micro video thing that TikTok is doing. And I think anything like that, and again, I've completely ignored this. So do as I say, don't do as I do. But I think if you get in on that early, anything like this, because they have to make it work, they put wind in your sails. They will push you out. They'll give you a boost that you might not otherwise get. There's that. But I think, I don't know, I've not seen any sort of trends beyond the usual kind of stuff. But yeah, short and sweet, I think.
Instagram is pushing that as well with Reels. So I think that micro
Yes,
content
yeah.
is going to be just important on socials in general. I think maybe that goes to say, this is getting a little deeper, but maybe that goes to our bite-sized approach to so many things like media and social media. So
Yeah, I think that's very true. You want things short and sweet, and there are pluses and minuses to that. And we're all stretched, and attention spans. I don't know if they actually are shrinking, but certainly YouTube seems to think so. But yeah, but to be honest, as an author, I live in fear of boring the reader or the viewer. And that's something I've taken with my YouTube as well. I don't want to be sitting around for 20 minutes going, you want to get straight to the point and deliver. And you make a promise to someone. So I create these title cards on Canva that will say, so this week's video was, how many characters is too many? Get in. It's promise something and deliver on that promise.
Where do you put that content?
That goes, well, first of all, I use it as a title card on YouTube, because if you just use the screen grabs, it's usually a very unflattering picture of you going, which no one wants. So it gives a uniformity to the look of your page. And again, if you look at my YouTube page, it took me a while to get that right. But that goes on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram as well. It just has this uniform message brand. And I keep it very simple.
I think that's a good tip. Sometimes simple is better.
Keep it simple, stupid. That's a big rule that I live by. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it works. Don't fix it if it's not broken. So you've mentioned a few resources as we've been talking, but have you yourself found any resources, other podcasts, other YouTube channels, books on YouTube, or creating that type of content that you would recommend to other authors?
I would recommend you check out Jeremy Mason's YouTube channel, because he's a documentary maker, a camera operator, and a very good editor. And he's really been digging deep into this kind of stuff. And he's great fun as well, and really knows what he's talking about. But no, I have just been pootling along doing my own thing, really. Like I say, I don't want to be the old man at the disco trying to look cool and trendy. I think I'm way behind the curve, to be honest. But that is who I am in terms of this kind of content. I can only be me, and that will probably be my failing in the end. But we'll see. I think people would see through it otherwise. But yeah, check out Jeremy's channel. Check out the early stuff that I did, where I'm a bit all over the place, and go from there. There are, like I said, there are all kinds of people who are promised the earth and everything out there, but I'm always wary of people who had early success on YouTube, because I saw this with my wife's YouTube page. She was an early adopter, and because of that, YouTube put wind in her sails, and she had this big success with it. Whereas I'm finding it much slower, and I think that's quite a common experience for authors coming onto YouTube. They're like, hang on, I'm only getting 6 views on this video. Where's the 1,000 views kind of thing? And it takes perseverance. So this is, again, if you're a writer, you understand that perseverance is very big in this game. You have got to hang in there for years before things finally slide into place. Yeah, hang in there, buddy.
That's my biggest advice to new writers, actually, is to have realistic expectations. Because I think so many times we jump into something and be like, this will be an instant success, and it almost never is. That's the exception. So realistic expectations. That's how you'll survive.
Yeah, and the thing is, the knockbacks never stop. You still get rejections, you still get things that don't work, you're still stuck. Writing doesn't really get much easier. You learn more methods to deal with different problems. And then you think, I'm not going to make the same mistakes. But then you discover all sorts of new mistakes that you can make. Yeah, but as writers, we are trying to solve the great unsolvable riddle, which is the human condition. And that's why it takes a lifetime. It's what I like about it. Just keep chipping away at the eternal question of life, the universe, and everything.
That that sounds daunting, but also I understand. I won't keep you too much longer, but as just an end, do you have any other wisdom that you would like to share with the channel that we have, the various channels that we have, and the Indie Author Magazine community?
Oh gosh, wisdom.
I'm keeping it real open. I feel like you just said you're chipping away at the great big question. So
that is always my big advice, which is hang in there, because you have to love this. You have to love. If you think this is a get rich quick scheme, you will soon discover the road to unhappiness and misery, because that's not what this is about. You have to find your happy place as a writer. You have to find your voice. Finding your voice is one of the most wonderful things. It took me years to figure out what my voice was. I was trying to be other people, trying to be Terry Pratchett, trying to be Neil Gaiman. I can't. Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman do that perfectly well. They do it better than anyone else. I had to learn to be Mark Stay, which could be a sobering experience, and having to face up to who I really am. But that's the big thing I've discovered, certainly the last couple of projects, the horror movie I've got coming next year and the Witches of Woodville books, which have these fantastical dressings with witches and leprechauns and monsters and stuff like that. But beneath it all, the stories are about things that come from a very true place in here, very real fears and anxieties and feelings that I have. And I find that whenever you make it personal and whenever you make it specific, there's a universality in that. I know people worry about thinking, I have this really weird anxiety about this one specific thing, but no one's going to be interested in that. Believe me, if you couch it in a great story, they will be interested, because you'll be astonished how many people have that same fear, have that same anxiety, have that same weird kink in their brain. So yeah, I think finding your voice is about being true to yourself, being honest to yourself, being fearless, which, as we were talking about at the beginning, you can put your heart and soul into something and then some nerd gives you a 1-star review on Goodreads and you think, oh. But then what you don't hear are the countless other people who it really moved them and touched them and meant something to them. Yeah, that's what I would say. Be truthful in your writing.
I love that. So for anybody who watches this video later, where can they find you and the Academy and the podcast? Tell us about that.
Okay, the podcast is the Bestseller Experiment. We're on all your usual podcast catchers. Come to bestsellerexperiment.com. On Twitter and Instagram, we're at bestsellerxp. On Facebook, we're the Bestseller Experiment. We have an academy, the Bestseller Academy, which opens its doors 3 times a year, and you'll get one-to-one coaching, and there's a great community there of writers. And we've got writers who are just starting out. We've got writers who are published but looking to take their writing to the next level. There are courses, there's coaching, there's live sessions, all sorts of fun stuff. For me, if you can find me at markstaywrites.com. I'm on Twitter and Instagram as @markstay. And also my books, The Witches of Woodville. Go to witchesofwoodville.com and you'll find the books there. And I have a newsletter with lots of free short stories and recipes for things like jam roly-poly, which feature in the books as well. So yeah. And I have a YouTube page. Did I mention I have a YouTube page?
Oh, yeah. Oh,
yeah. But yeah, just follow me on any kind of social media, and I'm regularly tweeting this stuff out there. So
awesome. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule on this. So you'll see your little words of wisdom show up in our magazine.
Oh dear.
But thank you so much again, Mark, and it was really nice to meet you.
My pleasure, Bre. Take care. See you again soon.